Welcome back to part 2 of our first exercise, ps1, using Photopea, and also talking about pixels and resampling and resolution. And we're working in Photopea and we're connecting it to Google Drive, and we did all that in the first video, so hopefully that worked out okay. Now, we didn't really do anything to our image yet except look at some things. We put out a ruler here and we saw that it's 50 by 36 or something like that. We saw that it's 10 megapixels, and we were looking at image size. And we are seeing that it's 50 inches by 38. Now, if you try to change it to pixels right now, it's not going to change. You have to resample and go look at it in pixel format. So now you can see that there's 36 by 27, but I'm going to put it back in inches. And I'm going to uncheck resample. Again, unchecking resample means you're safe. You're not removing or getting rid of any pixels right now. Now, I mentioned that the higher the resolution, you're kind of cramming all those pixels into a smaller area. So here they're kind of spread out. It's 72, which is kind of low resolution, but it's over a 50 by 38 area. That's like a big poster size area. But if you had just a small snapshot and it was just like 6 inches, just like a regular photograph, you could see that then the resolution would jump because you're taking all those pixels and cramming them into a smaller area. So with resampling unchecked, it always keeps your same pixels. It's just changing the container. This is a small container, 6 inches. 50 inches is a large container, so it's more spread out. But obviously you're looking at that from further away too. So the vantage point of where you're seeing pixels is also very important. Now, I mentioned zooming into different things. Again, we looked in this originally and we could see people in here, and I'll hold my space bar and move it. If the police came and said, hey, there was a big balloon accident, and did you see anybody in there? I could say, well, I took a picture and I could see there's 2 people at least, and there might be 1 or 2 more. There might be 4 people in there, and they might say, wow, that's a pretty good picture. That's very helpful for us. And then after the police officer leaves, you might say, well, you know what, this is taking a lot of space up. I think I'm going to go into my image size and maybe I'll resample it, and 50 inches is too big. Maybe I'll take it down to like 6 inches or something like that. I don't need a 50-inch image. And if I click it there and I hit OK, you can see what's happening. When I check resample, that's going to get rid of all those extra pixels. And if I go to pixels, it's actually going to leave me with 432 by 324. That won't even be a million pixels. So you got to be very careful about this. Now, I'm just doing this obviously as an example here to say, okay, what if I just kind of made it smaller? Now, if I hit OK here, I'll think, oh no, look what happened, but I'll zoom in and I'll go, oh, that doesn't look too bad. It looks fine. And then the police come back. They're like, let's see that picture again. And they'll say, oh, okay, let me zoom in. And now if you zoom in to this, they'll be like, what happened here? They'd be like, well, I resampled it. I thought it'd be better on a 6 inch than 50 inches. Thought that was too big. Well, now if you zoom in, you can't see any detail. Now, zooming back, it kind of looks okay. If you're looking at it at this size, if this was an image on a website, you look at it and you say, oh, that looks fine. But if you really needed to zoom in and see more details, there's not much detail there anymore because we removed a lot of the pixels. So all the pixels are removed now. So now when I zoom in, I'm losing all that detail. So that's where all those megapixels, that extra resolution. Now, resolution is basically how many pixels per inch. Now, I don't know if we could see this here because it's really hard to see. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here on our ruler. Now, if you think of this as an inch, if you look at this, there's an inch, and there's basically 72 pixels between there. And we were looking at it that there was actually anywhere from 600 to 300. So that's a huge difference. If you get in here to a 1/4 inch, there's not many pixels. If you think of a 1/4 inch and you take the quarter amount of pixels, that's a quarter of 72. That's like 16 pixels or so in this little area of where these people are. So that's really hard to see a lot of detail. So the nice thing here is if you needed to go back, you can go back here and go back to the open. Now, one thing I want you to do here, if you take away all those pixels, and I'll just zoom out here so we see our image, what you can do is you could save this as a different version. And this is the version you're going to turn in just to make sure we're able to do all this. If you double click here, I'm just going to change the name. I'm just going to put a _low. I'll put it in there and I'll hit OK. That means when I export this, this will be in low resolution. And what you can do to export this, now we didn't even save this yet. I'm going to do File, Export As, and I'm going to choose JPEG. And you can see it's 432 by 324. The quality, you can adjust the quality. It'll get a little more blurry It won't adjust the pixels, but it will get a little more blurry. It's a compression scheme when you use quality. You can change this a little, leave it up to 80. We won't probably notice the difference right here. And it's not that important whether we have it at 70, 80, or even max, but that helps compress it more when we adjust the quality. And what I'm going to do is I'll use save, and it'll save it as a JPEG using that name. So I'm just going to hit save, and it just downloaded it, and it put it in my downloads. And that's the one you're going to turn in for this exercise right there. So it's in your downloads if that's where downloads default to, which they probably should. So I'll close that up. Now it's in my downloads. Now, one thing in Photopea, now I'm going to go over more about Photopea. This is just a little kind of start talking about pixels and resolution. You can go back to open to see the original. Now this is before saving it. I didn't save it yet, but they have history in here, so you can go back, and you can go back to open where it was high resolution, because you can see we did an image size change and a name change, and that's part of the history. Now, one thing I just want to take a look at here before we get out of here is if I wanted to look at that porch again. Remember that porch we were looking at here? Zoom into that. I can't see anything. I can't see what that thing looked like when I zoom in. Now I could kind of guess when I zoom back a little bit. You know, your eyes kind of blur and you kind of, fill in the blanks a little bit, but there's no detail there. So if the police needed to look at this and use this for evidence, they'll be like, well, we can't definitely say there's anybody in there, even though you could kind of assume because there's kind of a fleshy color right there. But it's really hard to kind of get anything from this now that we took away all those extra pixels. So again, resampling, just to review, resampling removes pixels. And why would you do that? Well, because you don't need it that big. If you're going to put it on a web page, if it's a small image, and it's in a little newsletter or something, or wherever you're putting it, you don't need to have it that big. Now, if it's something where you have to zoom in and crop something, or if you're going to make it very large, you want all those extra pixels. But resampling is basically getting rid of those. And if you tried to upsample, let's say you did this, and I always like to point this out, is if you upsampled, if you're like, oh man, the policeman who came here is upset, maybe I'll just go back to image size. And you can go back to image size and just put them all back. Just say, oh, that was like 50 inches or something. You could go back here and make it 50 inches again. And click here, and you can see it's resampling to do that. And I'll just hit OK. And you might think, oh, thank God. Now, of course, you could have used the history right here, but I'm just kind of skipping that for now. So I'm going to do Control-0 or Command-0 to see the whole thing. And now you might think, oh, good, all that quality's back. And if I zoom in here, look what happened. I just want to point this out, that this is upsampling. Now, before we downsampled to make a small image, that's the one we downloaded, but we downsampled. We removed pixels. Now, here we added pixels. Now, I just want you to point out that adding pixels does not add back quality. It basically approximates where the pixels are, and it just kind of blurs them together. Now, it looks a little better. It's kind of diffused right now. It's not really helpful. Photopea and Photoshop both use a scheme, an interpolation scheme, to kind of look at neighboring pixels to figure out what color should be there. So it gives you kind of a blurry look. So one thing I just want to point out, that even though we upsampled or we put extra pixels there, it didn't really help our quality. It just kind of smoothed things out a little bit. So you can't always just put pixels back. You'd have to go back to where you opened this file, or you'd have to go back to the original image that you had. So you can't necessarily do that. So I'm actually going to go back to open here. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to close it without even saving it, because remember, we didn't really do anything. We changed the name when we exported it, and make sure you did that. And I'm just going to close this up. And then I'm going to go back to my Warren. I'm going to log back into my Warren, and I'm going to go to coursework, and I'm going to look for Unit 13. This is the balloon one. And I'm going to click on here. Now, we're going to turn that image in that you downloaded. Now, how do you do that? We're not using upload, because sometimes that's a pain, but I'm going to use add comment. And we're going to go here to insert image. And again, now we're not uploading the Photoshop file. We're uploading the JPEG that you exported. So you're going to go to image, and you're going to click on source file, and you're going to look for it. Now I'm going to look for it under my downloads. And I want the one that's the JPEG. Now here's the low. Now I'm not sure which one it is, because I did this before as I was messing around with it. 635. This is probably the one. Here's one from earlier. It doesn't matter which one you use. This is the most recent one. I put a 1 here, I think, because it's the most recent one, but they're the same thing anyway. Now they're in my downloads. Now I'll hit open. The only thing I just want to make sure is that it's okay using that space in there. I'm just going to insert, and there it is, and that's the size that I wanted. If it shows something really big, then that's not the right one. And I'll hit OK, and you should be able to see it right in here. You should be able to see it right there, And that's it. That's all you need. That just kind of tells me that, hey, you were able to open it up, you were able to resample it down to 72 pixels per inch at 6 inches by 4.5 inches, and you were able to export it as a JPEG, and here it is. Because if you try to put up the Photoshop file, it would not let you put it in here anyway, so this has to be the JPEG. So that's all you have to do. So I'm just going to hit save, and when it's in here, I'll just see it, and if it's gigantic, I'll know that you didn't resample it. So make sure that you resample it, make sure you exported it, and make sure you go through the steps on the PDF too to help you with that. And that's all you have to do for this exercise. We're obviously going to do more exciting stuff and more fun stuff with Photopea than just doing that, but that was just our start to make sure that we can launch Photopea, that we can connect to our Google Drive, that we could save it in there. Now we're going to do more with that in our next exercise, but this is just kind of our little start with photo imaging, and part of it was to go over pixels too. So we're going to talk more about that this week.